Hello and welcome to the Kitchen Conversations podcast. My name is Patrycja Rozwora and I'm the host of this platform where we speak about contemporary art from so-called Eastern Europe. In each episode, you're going to be introduced to one artist or researcher whose visual or activist practice sheds light onto the complex former socialist region with all its histories, cultures, languages, foods, but also traumas and their inevitable contemporary consequences. This podcast is a fully independent platform existing since May 2020, meaning it is not a funded project and it is self-run by me, myself, and I. If you enjoy the monthly conversations, please consider supporting the podcast by making a single donation on buymeacoffee.com/kitchenconversations or becoming my monthly Patreon via the Patreon website. All the needed links can be found in the show notes of this episode. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Kitchen Conversations. Today, recorded right from my living room, I'm joined by Ilja Aviarjanaŭ, a Belarusian cultural entrepreneur and the founder of XianCha Tea, a tea shop dedicated to promoting Taiwanese tea across Germany and Europe. We begin our conversation with a calming tea ritual led by Ilja, which sets the tone for a deep dive into his passion for tea and the origins of his healing journey through tea drinking and social connection, especially meaningful in these precarious and uncertain times. If you're curious about why a Belarusian tea lover became an advocate for Taiwanese tea culture, stay tuned. The story will guide us from the Taiwanese tea ritual to Eastern Slavic tea culture with rap music and tea clubs along the way. I promise, it won't get boring. We are having a cup of tea. Tell me, what are we having?
We are having some freshly brewed Preaching Ming Festival green tea from Taiwan. The kind of tea is called biluchun, or something like emerald snail. And what's special about this tea is that first it was harvested on my birthday this year, just a coincidence. And the second thing is that this type of tea is from the very first harvest of the year. So it's very gentle, very fresh, and kind of a celebratory cup, you can say, to greet the new spring and the new year.
Indeed, the podcast will be out a little bit later, so probably already into the summer. But yeah, we are in spring and both of us have allergies. But actually, for me, it's better in the evening. It's kind of settling down. Yeah. So I feel I will be fine, but feel free to do what you need to do. I'll do the cuttings. Yeah, so as we said, we met some years ago through a common friend, Kai. Yeah, you were a guest on his podcast, Us Gays, and then I was like, okay, I mean, you were a guest just there on his podcast, so I should wait a bit for inviting you to my podcast. And in the meantime, we met a few times, and I joined a few of your events. You did join mine here in Berlin, and I think today we will mainly speak about you, of course, and tea, but also about music and Eastern Europe. What else do you think?
There's going to be some history involved and a little bit of maybe philosophizing or kind of sort of like going on a meta level about Eastern Europe and culture and history. Some interesting observations I've made recently about what's so special about the culture in this region.
Exciting. So for the beginning, introduction, I guess, would be in some form nice for those who don't know you yet and don't know what you're doing. How would you like to be introduced by yourself?
Oh, it's always a crazy story. So, well, my name is Ilja. I've been living in Berlin for about 12 years now. And before that, it's been a roller coaster with living in different places. So my family comes from Belarus. I was born in Austria. I lived in New York as a kid, and then moved with my parents to Belarus, and then had to learn Belarusian and Russian and German as an English speaker. I spent my teenage years there, and then we went to Italy for a year, and then finally my family decided to settle in Germany.
Oh, so your family is also here?
Yeah.
But not in Berlin, right?
Yeah, in Berlin. Yeah.
As well.
Not extended family, but my closest family for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I work, as many people might have guessed already, with tea. I have a Taiwanese tea shop where we put a lot of focus on selling exclusively Taiwanese tea and spreading Taiwanese culture through this product. We work a lot with artists, and we blend sort of traditional tea culture with a lot of technical innovation in terms of how it's grown and in terms of marketing. We work with artists to develop some tea spirits, kind of Pokemon style, anime style tea spirits, to tell stories about each of the tea and hopefully attract more young people to this culture. And my education is business administration. I finished the Freie Universität Berlin with a heavy focus on marketing and specifically mascot marketing.
What does that mean?
So mascots are those personas that we create to represent a brand. When you think about Meister Proper, right? This bald man in a white shirt, he's the mascot of Meister Proper. If you think about Nesquik has that bunny, as the mascot. And you can have people as mascots
Milka?
as well. Yeah, right. You can have people as mascots as well. For example, Kentucky Fried Chicken actually has the owner as a mascot. And Japan went very far in that. And there, everything has a mascot. Like a city has a mascot. Each train station has a mascot. Like restaurants have mascots, businesses, everything. Like I feel like even like some toilets might have mascots in Japan.
Yeah. It sounds like a Japanese thing.
And so when I was writing my bachelor's degree on that topic, I think that was the funniest paper my professor read in like, I don't know, the past maybe like 5 years. I guess an important thing about what I do and did was also the Belarusian protests in 2020. That's also part of the reason how we got to know each other, because at the time of the protests, a lot of things have changed for people in Belarus. And then if we, looking from the peak of 2025 back in history, then 2014 with Crimea, and then the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and also the coronavirus. Like after 2020, coronavirus was 2020. So after that, Europe was no longer the same.
Yeah, shit went down.
I got involved a lot with activism. I joined the Razam collective here in Berlin to support people fleeing from the regime, both financially and in terms of psychological support, integrating into German society and finding work. Also working with psychologists and getting involved in a lot of Eastern European projects in terms of sort of discrimination that some Eastern Europeans face in Western Europe, and advocating for queer rights in Eastern Europe, and generally trying to facilitate that cultural exchange. Now, 5 years later, I would say after the protests, there's been a lot of time to evaluate my own resources and our collective resources and what we can do, how we should tackle these things. And it's been a journey.
Mm-hmm. And would you say tea plays an important factor in that, in this kind of situation of crises and feeling like you really don't know what to do and how to help, and feeling kind of left alone, perhaps?
Yeah, so both on my personal level, from my personal experience and experience of many other people I know, tea as a ritual, especially if you get involved into more advanced tea brewing, such as in China, Taiwan, or Japan, Korea, doing that on a daily basis, it's definitely creating a sort of safe space for you and a sort of routine that creates a sense of security and safety and it helps you to go through difficult phases in life. So for me, there were times where I was, during all the protests and witnessing all the news and digesting a lot of bad information. I was on the verge of mental breakdown, basically. But that is one of the things. This daily tea routine is one of the things that definitely kept me in line and gave me strength. And I know other people who dealt with, divorce and being like a mother and a child being left by the husband and having to kind of, restructure their whole life. And I actually know 2 or 3 women like that who were also able to keep it all together thanks to tea. And
that's so nice.
And on a larger scale, this is I guess part of today's conversation that we wanted to have about Eastern Europe and how this emerging tea culture that started emerging around 2010, how it also evolved with the introduction of those coronavirus and the Russian invasion and and the protests in Belarus, and how people sort of used tea clubs and tea houses and their tea circle of friends to have sort of process that trauma that they were and are facing on an everyday basis. And it's kind of, I would say, like even the evolution of that post-Soviet kitchen conversation thing where you can gather somewhere safe, exchange your opinions on specific topics and also kind of be your own psychiatrist and figure out your problems by talking to other people rather than going to a doctor.
And I somehow like the idea that you have this community moment and you don't drink alcohol, but you share something else. Like tea as such a kind of kind and gentle way of spending time in comparison to alcohol or drugs or something you would usually use, substances you would usually use when you gather, or like what we think maybe as a Western way of spending time with people. Yeah,
so it's definitely, tea is an antidepressant, just like coffee. It gives you energy. It's a stimulant. But unlike coffee, it's much more gentle. And so it doesn't give you that sort of anxiety that you can get from drinking a lot of coffee. And depending on what kind of tea you're drinking and how you're preparing it, you can definitely get a state of tea drunkenness, where it's not,
the tea high.
Yeah, it's not like drinking a lot of alcohol or consuming other forms of drugs, but it's definitely some state that kind of keeps you focused and relaxed at the same time. And a lot of people, they enjoy that state. And I guess you can say that it's addicting in terms of that it's a joyful state, but there is no actual scientific evidence that it's addicting on a chemical basis.
I wanted to speak about your brand or your business, however you call it, your tea house or store. XianCha, is that how you say it?
In Chinese, it's called XianCha. So
XianCha.
It's a wordplay in Chinese. So the first character Xian, it's you can see it in some words like shui xian, like a water fairy. So it usually describes good spirits, so magical spirits that are good natured, not like gui, like ghosts or demons. And we have our tea spirits there, right? So that's why that character is there, and cha obviously is tea. So it's kind of like a fairy tea or spirit tea. But then also xian is used in describing what in English is called immortals, I believe. So those people in Taoism and Buddhism who, specifically in Chinese Buddhism, who have obtained through cultivation, through this mastery of nature and their own body and mind, they have attained something that what we call like saints in Christianity. But they call them immortals. And the character Xian is comprised of a person and mountain. And the idea is that a person goes into the mountains to cultivate, to sort of elevate themselves to a next state of being. And that part of the meaning in XianCha is the idea that tea is sort of our guru or our teacher or sensei, our shifu or lao shi, who is teaching us wisdom. And I am a strong believer that by drinking tea and paying attention to your body and how the tea influences your body, and learning about the region where it's grown, how to prepare it, you learn about yourself, you physically and emotionally. You learn about nature and agriculture. You learn about the local culture, maybe even history. And so that way tea is like a teacher.
Mm. And how often do people ask you how does your Belarusian identity come together with promoting here the Taiwanese tea culture and teas?
Well, it definitely raised some eyebrows in a mild sense. And so when I came to Germany, I lived in a boarding school, or like a boarding, boarding house. I lived with some people from southern China and Taiwan, and I actually got to learn tea culture from them by seeing the tea that they brought or their family brought to them, and kind of drinking it with them.
All right.
Even though I had my first authentic tea experience of Chinese tea back in Belarus when my father brought some tea from China, but it really sparked my interest here, and I also was learning some Chinese with these friends, and went to find some tea houses here in Berlin, and started kind of helping out in one of the tea houses and learning more and more, and watching tons of videos online in different languages, and researching about the tea production, and etc. etc. I came to the decision to work exclusively on Taiwanese tea because Taiwanese identity is not similar, but I guess it shares some similar parts to Belarusian identity, in that both Taiwan and Belarus sort of have this, as others can see, larger brother into like China or Russia,
watching over them.
Yeah, who is saying you don't have your own culture, you don't have your own language, you are part of us, you cannot be sovereign, you shouldn't be a sovereign state. Of course, those are different nuances between Taiwan and Belarus, but there's definitely that similar identity crisis with the Taiwanese people trying to kind of find who they are, because they actually, a lot of them see themselves as the true authentic China, not the communist China, but the original imperial China and carriers of the Chinese culture. They're not trying to say oh, we're not the same as mainland China. No, they're a lot of them saying, we are the China, and these guys are just playing some sort of game that at some point, they will have to stop playing. But it's a very hot debate, and many people think different things there. But with Belarusians, there's also this idea how far you want to go with your Belarusian identity in terms of reinforcement of the language, and whether we should participate in the Russian cultural realm, and if there's some music and concerts or some art exhibitions and whatnot, what kind of media we consume. So there's this whole identity crisis going on, and my choice to sell exclusively Taiwanese tea was to support Taiwanese culture and say, we're not against China and Chinese tea, but we want to support Taiwanese culture and Taiwanese tea, and we want people to learn about this place, to put it on people's map. And I'm a strong believer that one of the best ways you can do that is through a product or a service or something that people can consume with Japan and anime. It's a great example that, Japan during Second World War committed many atrocities with Chinese and other oceanic people, but specifically with China. And nowadays, people don't think about it because they see anime and cute Japanese culture, and they completely don't think about, that many Japanese people are still racist. But when they look at Germany, they're like, oh no, yeah, Germans are bad. Germans are this and that. And even though Germans try to process their culture, and compared to Japan, definitely they have processed World War II much more.
Aufarbeitung is strong.
But people just don't give Germany a break and continue bashing this country, whereas Japan, everybody's like, oh no, Japan is cute because anime, or so J-pop or Japanese culture. And so that's kind of the thing that inspired me for promoting Taiwanese culture, is taking their tea, which is incredible. Taiwan is the crown jewel of Oolong in the world, I would say. And, Taiwan also has many cool artists, musicians. They even have their own, like mascots and sort of their own version of anime as well, just like China and Korea does. And that's kind of where we went at it as a Belarusian promoting Taiwanese culture.
Yeah, and totally. I think it's really worked, because today for preparing for this podcast, I watched quite some videos about Taiwan. I mean, we know stuff right from the news, and also now the geopolitical situation is, let's see what happens soon in general in the world.
It's very prickly.
A lot of tension. But it was indeed like I had your tea here, and I was like, okay, Ilja is coming. And then it really motivated me and sparked my interest to learn more about Taiwan also. So thanks for that. To the tea shop, I also wanted to speak a little bit more. You already mentioned the characters of the different teas you're selling. I find them amazing, and the whole graphic design. Who makes it for you? Who's behind it?
So the tea spirits themselves, as we call them,
spirits,
we don't want Nintendo and Pokemon to go and put copyright strikes.
Indeed, it was like my first, Pokemon was my first connection. But
so the tea spirits, we actually work with different artists from. Actually, I think all of them are from Central and South America. It just happened when I was looking at different Pokemon or Fakemon artists around the internet. Mm-hmm. Most people who I found with styles I liked were from Mexico or Costa Rica. And I wrote to them and, said, hey guys, we want to develop those characters. We'd like to pay you for commercial use of these images. And so actually, if you go on our website and open up the tea spirits, you can read about each one of them. There's kind of like a little story that tells you about this tea spirit. And there you can also find the artists who drew them. Or if you go to our Instagram, the very posts where we introduce each new tea spirit, we also link the artists there. So it's not a secret. You can find the creators and reach out to them if you want, them to make some work for you as well. And my vision was to make it sort of like a collaborative community thing, where once we've gained enough followers and enough online presence, that we would throw sort of like those online competitions for designs of new tea spirits. And young artists, or it doesn't have to be young, but I mean like specifically rookie artists could take part in it. And then we would have a community vote and see which design wins. And with that person, we would sign a commercial contract and sort of take their work and use it. And this way, these people, they get their first commercial work and a lot of exposure, because, such community events facilitate people to look at new artists and follow them. At the core of this entire tea project, I would say, is a lot of grassroots movements, sort of word of mouth, community and art participation, and trying to do marketing. As I said, my focus in my bachelor was also a lot on marketing. And I was very interested in marketing that creates something after itself. In our marketing, we try to market through events, through collaborations, through, a lot of human interactions and community building. It's not as easy because you expect everybody who is participating in this to act upon their own goodwill, and you expect them to not be assholes and
appreciate your efforts and work.
Also I appreciate your effort, contribute to this, maybe share, maybe, do something else, maybe be more lenient about something. But so it's obviously not without its own drawbacks, but still this method has worked out for us. And I'm very, I would be very proud when I'm lying in bed living like my last hours to like on the what's called on the death's door. I would be like,
bad or something,
I would be like, you know what? If this world is dying, it's not because of me. I was a good guy. Everything we were produced, natural farming, tea is a nice product. We didn't destroy our environment. We didn't use child labor. Even our marketing is good. So Hasta la vista.
You have a clear card.
It was not my fault.
Nice.
Солнце слепит, теплый вигель ветер, улыбчивые дети. Стоит заметить, что многих поглотили сети. Хватит сидеть там, выходи к дню на скейте. Ты готов быть счастливым котом, делиться со всеми сейчас огнем, а не потом. Где ты, эй, где ты? Давай улыбаться от трезвости и простоты. Посмеемся над собой от души, закроем уши от навязанной инфолапши. Айда воплощать в жизнь свои мечты. Пора поверить в себя, пора строить мосты. Фигури Дэнда, фан, взял в руки майк. Фигури слава, фейм, сделала это вайп.
So that's a nice way to circle it back to the Eastern European tea culture. Because you mentioned the events and the live personal in-person meetings, and this is how you try working with your clients and future customers. And I was lucky to join one of your recent, I think, tea events in Berlin, where you really did make it about Eastern Europe. And not only that, but also rap music. And I was like really amazed about your research and how you connected all those things, which probably wouldn't be so easy to find a common denominator for Taiwanese tea, Eastern Europe, and rap music. So you basically presented your discoveries, your research, you played music, we had some tea. And I thought, yeah, let's speak more about it on the podcast.
Honestly, I feel like somebody should write a scientific paper about this phenomena.
Yeah.
Because this is completely not researched. So some people talk about this, but on a scientific level, it's still not there.
There you go, maybe a PhD or something for you.
Yeah, so Eastern Europe and tea and rap. So it's a bit of an unusual combo, but it's something that has become natural for us Eastern Europeans, especially Eastern Slavic countries, which are Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia. Since, I would say, 2008 or 2010, when some Russian rappers became very interested in tea and decided to put tea into their songs. More specifically, the rappers Basta and Goof with their song ЧП or Чайный пьяница.
Meaning?
Tea drunk. They kind of, introduced, I would say, the Russian-speaking population to Chinese tea through that song and that clip. And by comparing tea to sort of drugs, and smuggling drugs, they sparked the interest of a lot of guys, maybe some girls as well, who were listening to rap to finally find out, what is the Honpao? What is pu'er tea? What is Tieguanin tea?
So they were like actually listing the types of tea in the song.
Exactly. And saying like what effects you can get from them, like different drugs. At that time, rap music was on the rise in the Russian-speaking realm of Eastern Europe, and the rappers started introducing tea. Some of them opened tea houses. Some of them were integrating tea into their songs. Not all of them, as in like not every song had some tea in it, but it sort of became synonymous with rap culture over the years. Just like, martial arts are associated with Wu-Tang Clan and a lot of early American like 80s, maybe like early 90s rap as well. So kind of like that old school stuff just became part of the whole culture. And because it was a genre that was growing in popularity, and I mean, even now I feel like hip hop and rap all over the world is a very common genre, and especially in Eastern Slavic countries as well. Yeah, more and more people on average who were just kind of like existing in the realm of pop culture became interested in tea and got into tea from a different angle. You would expect maybe like spirituality or sort of like this, something like mysterious from a faraway land. But, now people were introduced to it at a different angle through this kind of like music and rap. And
it's kind of like a cool thing.
Also like a very masculine energy, Because I feel like here in Western Europe, tea has this feminine energy around it with like this elegance and cutesy porcelain, flowers.
This beauty also of the ritual and
meditation, maybe like some spiritual retreat. But then there was this masculine energy of like, drugs and rap and tea and like all these like guys who, judging by tattoos, were like went to prison, and also, in Russian prisons, actually, tea, there is even a term called chefir or chefirit, which means to brew exceptionally strong black tea so that you get like poisoning from that tea, from like the drug, because that was sort of the only way to get your high without drugs or alcohol in prison in Siberia. I mean, I haven't personally experienced that. I haven't been to a gulag or something, but that's also part of the, specifically, I would say, Russian culture. So I've done some research on how tea came from Russia to Ukraine and Belarus, because these countries, just like with Poland and Rzecz Pospolita, were more of coffee countries originally. And then when they became part of the Russian Empire, slowly like tea became more and more popular. It came through music, and then these rappers started opening this new sort of, it's not a cafe, it's not a restaurant, it was called a tea club. Mm-hmm. And the focus there was on the community and the events. And obviously, like many tea clubs, they were also part of the music collective. And I guess a good example is Gazgolder, is one of those large music production labels. And I think Basta is one of the owners of the label. So definitely he's very involved there. So, they were at the origins. And, it's like, whoa, exclusive club, and hip-hoppers and music producers and businessmen all hang out, brew their tea, talking about deep philosophical stuff.
Sounds a bit like a coffee shop, right?
Yeah, but...
Coffee shop meaning with weed,
Oh, that kind of coffee shop. I was thinking more like, traditional like Turkish style of coffee shop, because, coffee house culture really sparked the whole revolution, scientific revolution in Europe, because before people were gathering to drink alcohol. Yeah. And then at coffee shops, you have all of those intelligentsia gathering together, discussing ideas and drinking coffee, which is a stimulant. And, there's even this joke about, or a legend about Hitler, Stalin, and somebody else, I forgot the third person.
Mussolini.
They could have all sat in the same coffee house in Vienna at the same time discussing like revolutions. And it was because every coffee house in Vienna had very specific clientele with specific ideas and ideologies. And just by looking at which coffee house a person went to, you could sort of gauge their political and socio-cultural inclination. And so that's the coffee house I was thinking about.
Yeah. But back to the tea houses, or tea clubs.
Yeah.
So you say like Russia, early 2000s were...
No, 2008, 2010.
Okay, so let's
early
say...
2000s is... Tatu going to Eurovision and throwing a private concert for Putin, and,
and
like,
well, that's the beginning
Russia
of
being
Putin's
like
time,
liberating in terms of LGBTQ rights.
Yeah. Okay, so the 2010s kind
and
of.
they, as with all things, it evolved, and some tea clubs became more focused on the traditional Chinese culture and introducing people to not so much the hip-hop part of stuff, but specifically the culture. So Chinese writing, music, history, games, and so on and so forth. Then there were sort of other tea clubs that were focusing on meditation and spirituality and yoga, and it was kind of like a third sort of way to have a tea club, but and there are different ones. Some have very scenic vistas, and some are focusing even on food. But the key element of a tea club is that it's very community focused and event based, and that is something that is different to a regular cafe or a bar, because people come there for drinks with their own company, and sometimes maybe there's like live music or something, but it's not a curated experience with events happening almost every single day. And I guess at a tea club, there's also a sense of ceremoniality, like you kind of sort of instill in people this idea that this is something special, and they have to be attentive and present and cherish this moment, and that they share with other people or just doing it by themselves. Speaking about, modern culture, I feel like this ceremoniality is something that is slowly dying out and now maybe even coming back. But certainly, I feel like people here in Berlin are missing some of that ceremoniality, because everything becomes more mundane. We're all wearing sweatpants. We're all like not obliging each other for anything. And maybe this sort of ceremoniality is what draws some people here in Berlin specifically to this sort of tea culture, that it's a special moment, just like, meeting your family for Christmas.
And if we speak about music, you said you also researched rap artists or bands from Ukraine and Belarus. Is that also a thing that they also rap about tea there?
Yeah, so it's not a phenomenon restricted to Russia. It's spread to neighboring countries as well. I know some artists from Ukraine and Russia who, till this year, so 2025, they release music with mentions of tea in it. And so they don't some of them dedicate entire songs to tea. As a joke, we've already been in this post-irony era where there was one rapper who made a whole song that was joking about rappers drinking tea. But now it just became like an attribute of modern rap music that, if you allow me to swear a little bit for creative purposes,
let's do it.
How it's part of rap culture in America to sing about bitches and pussies. It's become part of Eastern Slavic rap culture to mention something about tea, like, I'm chilling at home and I'm mixing this tea with that, or me and my bros, we know the real stuff, and you go back and to your house and brew your own tea or something. So it became an insider that everyone in this community sort of gets, because yeah, of course, because tea and rap.
So funny. Definitely a PhD there, really. I would love to know more. And probably it's also part of other countries of the Slavic cultures as well.
I wouldn't be surprised. Kazakhstan is obviously not Slavic, but it still has ties to Russia, and they have their own rap culture. And I'm not as familiar with their rap culture, but I know that they also have a developing tea culture there as well. I mean, they're halfway to China compared to Europe. They're much closer geographically. So obviously they will have easier time connecting with China and Korea. I know that a lot of people in Kazakhstan actually go to South Korea to work, and they either pretend to be Korean or they get confused for Koreans. And they watch a lot of K-pop drama. But I am certain that there are some rap connections happening there as well. And, tea could have squeezed into the Kazakh rap culture as well. I'm just not as familiar to be certain. Let's take Poland and Germany, for example. So Poland has a more developed tea culture than Germany, I would say, at least just judging by the amount of tea festivals and how long they've been hosting tea festivals in different towns. But a lot of those tea clubs / tea houses, sort of tea places, I know are opened by either Poles or Ukrainians as well. I remember one Ukrainian guy was asking us to supply some tea for their tea place. And so what they do is what they did in that place specifically, they combined shisha or a hookah place with sushi and with tea. And that is only possible because the owners are Slavic and they don't have a cultural connection either to sushi or hookah or shisha. Now, here's the trick. I tried talking to shisha owners in Berlin, but they're all Turkish or Arabic. And they say, we don't need Chinese or Taiwanese tea. We have our own tea culture.
Indeed,
and we have our cultural thing.
Pretty strong one also,
why are you
right?
coming here with what is this? And for Slavic people, when I was talking about philosophizing about Slavic and Eastern European people, actually, so Slavic people are so special in my head in that regard that throughout history, because of the large population and large swaths of land that Slavic people occupied, they have always been like a cauldron of absorbing different cultures. They were absorbing, German culture, Viking culture, Turkic culture. If you look at Slavic people, interacting with Rome, also like on the borders of Romania, and so, and also like Greece with Ukraine, like they have absorbed, or we have absorbed so many cultures. When you think about Rus, right, like the old Rus, the Kievan Rus, of living sort of like in a love-hate relationship with the nomadic people, like the Scythians, and then being governed by the Vikings, right? And then in Belarus or in Rzecz Pospolita, in the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, having 5 different religions coexisting, different languages having equal status, and all of that multiculturalism.
Way more than now, right?
Yeah, and with Jewish people and with Tatar people, like as Muslims living on that territory since the 14th century. It's like a cauldron of cultures. And I don't know what it is, but I feel like, yes, just Slavic nature to kind of try to integrate and coexist instead of, purging. But then, again, it's idealized version, because if you think about Polonization or Russification, we can see that these Slavic people think that, or thought at some point in history that their culture is more should be the one that survives compared to other ones, right? But, even now, when we look at the present day, it's the Slavic people who create this kind of crazy concepts of like, let's take Arabic shisha or hookah, right? Combine it with sushi and put Chinese tea there, right? Or just have tea and hookah, right?
Where's that place again?
I have to look it up. But this is a pretty common thing in Poland, and I think in all of Ukraine and Belarus, you can find those like hookah places with really good tea. I mean, in Eastern Slavic countries where tea culture is developed, it's a very important part of having a good tea menu. If you want to be a respected restaurant or respected cafe, you gotta have a good tea menu. If you don't, it's kind of like frowned upon. So like on average, people have a higher standard of what they expect from tea, whereas here in Germany, it's kind of more, you're focused on coffee, and if you have some sort of loose leaf tea, or if you have like 5 different Kräuter teas,
you're already
right?
like,
it's like, wow,
you're already
you guys rock.
The tea place.
Yeah,
funny. And in terms of Soviet tea culture, because as you said, we associate tea with Eastern Slavic countries and other countries that were part of the Soviet Union. Was this the time when tea came from China to the Soviet Union, or what, did it happen even before?
So tea came to Russia during the Russian imperial times, so before Soviet Union. So what Soviet culture contributed to in this topic is not so much tea, the product, but rather the sort of the social background of those tea clubs and the tea community forming. So, right, the tea community in Eastern Slavic countries is very informal. It's not just those tea clubs that exist as business entities. It's also lots of people self-organizing and doing kind of like tea retreats, meeting together to drink tea, right? And so it's very fluid culture. It's not like a fixed cafe or a place. It can be also, as I said, like an informal gathering. But what the Soviet culture contributed towards the development of this phenomenon is that the kitchen conversation things, right? So that people gathering in the kitchen and sort of like being their own psychologists to work through the issues and discuss some stuff they couldn't discuss in the open. And also I talk about kvartirniki in my workshops. And recently I actually did some research on how kvartirniki popped up in general. So for those of you who don't know, kvartirnik, kvartira is a flat in Russian. And kvartirnik is sort of like a private in-house concert that lots of rock musicians during the Soviet times were doing. So
the dissidents, or like let's say the
because
opposition.
they were not welcomed on the official stages, they would do concerts behind closed doors, and some prominent say like the owner of a radio station who would be like pro-regime on paper, but then in private life would invite those musicians, and because they saw that this is what the public's hearts desire, and then they would do this house concert and have like tape recordings of that house concert, and then distribute the tapes just person to person. They would play it out and record another tape, and that's sort of how stuff was spreading. And I dug deeper into this topic of how these house concerts came to be, and actually they originated because of we call it bardic songs. So those bards who originated after Second World War, it's just those like tourism became popular. Sports tourism was how it's called, became popular in Soviet Union, and lots of students were organized in official student organizations, and they would travel across Soviet Union, and they would, for sports tourism, and they would gather around the fire, pull out the guitar, and write sing poetry that they were writing. And they were writing not about the communist propaganda, obviously. They were writing more about the romantic sides of life and friendship and love and the spirit of traveling together. So it was kind of what their hearts desired. And more those songs became more political, because obviously, when you have elite students and professors writing this kind of music in the middle of nature, eventually you're going to have some people who oppose the regime. And the regime wasn't supportive of those unions of people who were writing this kind of music. And so they kind of gathered in the houses, and that was where the kvartirniki were born. And later, out of those bardic music, sort of what we call Russian rock evolved out of it. And people like the legendary Viktor Tsoi or, the band Kino, they carried on the legacy of the bardic people, but now it's like rockers.
Crazy. And I guess they were drinking tea.
Well, I'm not sure, but the point of what I was trying to make is that they sort of took this intimacy of inviting maybe even people you don't know to your flat and sort of cramping everybody together to create music or listen to music or become creative and very personal. That sort of transformed into this modern tea culture with lots of people going to somebody's house or gathering somewhere. And then, with rap culture, as we mentioned before, even say, do some rap freestyling or maybe dancing or just sort of spending time together in an intimate manner that we don't see in Western Europe as much. At least that's my personal observation. I don't think that people here would be open to have such large groups, unless it's maybe some sort of a house party. But house parties are different. Everybody is usually under, influence of some substances.
And it's not tea.
And they're not talking about deep stuff. Yeah. This form of gathering, it's not exclusive to post-Soviet countries. It would occur anywhere where there's a sort of a dictatorship or authoritarian regime. And making a full circle to China and Taiwan, that's another thing that connects us post-Soviet kids with Chinese people, is that duality of life. And I guess also to people from GDR, that you understand that you have to live two lives or two personas, the one that you show to the public, which is safe, and the one that you share only with, people you trust. Because if you share it with the wrong person, somebody can get hurt or reported, to the authorities.
Yeah, for sure. And as we slowly reach the end of this super nice podcast, I wanted to ask, what's your plan for the rest of the year? How would you, in an ideal way, like to develop the company, the brand?
So we are growing slowly, organically, as I said, also without any external investors. So we maintain the full control of what is happening with our company, and the plans for future are this summer we're going to Paris Tea Festival, which will be the first one for us.
Cool.
We plan to join more festivals across Europe. Hopefully, start those community-driven events with the art challenges, and so that we get more involved with the artist community. I have the plans of finding some keramists who would love to collaborate with us and create some ceramics for us. And I've already eyed some artists, especially in Poland, who definitely had that beautiful blend of European and Chinese or Taiwanese sense of style in ceramics. So that would be definitely an exciting project. And one of my biggest wishes for the future is also to bring some artists or cultural people from Taiwan to Europe and host some events with people from Taiwan. And so that it's not me who is acting as the representative of Taiwanese culture, but the actual people from Taiwan, maybe doing some artist workshops or ceramics workshops, and so trying to expand this cultural exchange just beyond tea and into something modern, I would say, like modern art or music.
Cool. Yeah, who knows? Maybe someone from Taiwan will hear this podcast. I'm always surprised, about all the places that it's being listened to, because I can trace in which country it's being listened to, and sometimes I have a lot of streams in Japan, for example. So who knows, maybe there will be someone contacting you. That would be super nice. Even if it was one person, that would be already quite amazing. And last but not least, I know you've been waiting for this question. The standard kitchen conversations question about food.
Yes.
And today usually we speak about non-domestic or product things. Today we did stay within that genre, so I think it's not so far from tea to food. So what is your favorite home food?
Yeah, I thought a long while about this, and the first thing that came to my mind is some kvartirniki. It's a dish that's traditional for Eastern Slavic countries. It's something like pancakes made out of cottage cheese, made out of tvorog, and it's usually eaten for breakfast with some jam or some sour cream. That is definitely something that sort of kind of invokes that feeling of home for me.
Can you buy a good tvorog here in Berlin?
It's been a struggle for me because you can buy, but not the right kind for this. So we actually have to go to Poland to buy the right one.
I went recently to Poland and I ate so much tvorog.
Yeah, and the other thing that's sort of like a really hearty meal, when you have the whole family gathering up, is the Belarusian babka. It's grated potato and different kinds of meat all mixed together in a clay pot and then baked in an oven. It's kind of has those multiple cooking stages. It looks simple when it's done, but it takes, I think, something like 4 hours to make. Fry some meats and then fry some other ingredients.
Cook the potatoes, I guess.
In the oil from the meats. And then when you combine that with the potato, sort of all of that meaty goodiness, permeates the whole of potato. And then you have the crunchy crust at the outsides of the whole thing in the clay pot, and then the soft inside.
Oh.
Yeah. And for vegetarians out there, you can make that with mushrooms or with fish. There's the Belarusian Jewish version of this dish is with mushrooms and fish.
Crazy. Never heard of this dish. I don't know if you said it. I think you said it in your workshop that there is no Belarusian restaurant yet in Berlin.
Not that I know of, yeah.
That's crazy, right? You would think there's everything in Berlin.
Right.
In terms of cuisines, but perhaps I could try it in some other place.
Like my kitchen?
Please, if you're willing to spend 4 hours on cooking. But it's vegetarian, so that would have to be with mushrooms.
Okay, no problem.
Nice.
Бро, ти знаєш, що вони чекали? І ми при лайні, крути жирний спліт, поки він спінить на голові. Наш нужний мув, наче постійний танець, це наш джетпек. Олдскульний ранець, вечорами мішаєм дахом з пуером. Заправились, розставили ваншоти по патернам. Яу, моє крісло грає на гітарі. Значить під це ми зараз захуярим. Бро, ти знаєш все, що ми любим цей процес. От на студії, хоч концерт, респект, не підкрутиш на таргет. І не всім цікаво почують твою правду. І у ці страшні часи війни ми повинні бути кожен при своєму лайні. Ти знаєш, бро, кожен на своєму фронті. Так що, сука, дай мені мікрофон. Йоу, ти знаєш, що вони чекали. Бро, ти знаєш, бро.
And this was it for today. Thank you for reaching till the end of this episode. The next one is coming in 4 weeks, always on Monday. Please follow the podcast and leave a rating. I'm also happy to hear your feedback, so feel free to write me via Instagram or by email. All the needed info you will find in the show notes of this episode. In the meantime, take good care and we hear each other soon.